This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
This is the sound of your ride home with Dad after he caught you vaping. Awkward, isn't it? Most vapes contain seriously addictive levels of nicotine and disappointment. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
Okay, so we're back with my uncle's escape Alcatraz, and we got a special guest today. We have one of our fans, somebody who's been listening to the podcast for a while. Mike reached out to a couple of the fans, and Justin agreed to come on to the podcast. This is Justin Godfrey, and Justin, I believe you're living in in North Carolina?
Yeah, in Shelby,
North Carolina. And so Justin, first of all, thanks for being on the podcast. Thank you so much for listening to this incredible story that we keep on talking about. And, we're still digging pretty deep into this thing. But wanted to kind of hear your perspective. I mean, we talk in our vacuum in our little echo chamber every week, but it's always good to hear people's feedback and what they think based upon all the facts that have been presented and all the information that's been presented. But let me start off. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and some of your life experiences. And we talked on the phone the other day, and you told me a little bit about how you have some similarities between the Anglin brothers and your life experience. So why don't we go from there? So go ahead, Justin.
Well, I'm Justin, and I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina originally, and I moved to Shelby. It was a lot cheaper, and I grew up in foster care, group homes, both places I ran away from. Couple of the group homes when I was in, they would put me in different rooms or whatever, and some that they say, hey, you can't get out of here. And so I would actually do that and get out of there, and I surprised them. I would climb on top of roofs, makes them chase me around. And I just find myself with the story because it's actually, I believe that if I was there at that time period and grew up in that time period, I probably would have been involved. To be honest.
Yeah. Is it because of why do you think that?
It's
just your personality?
I mean, and not only that, I kind of, I grew up poor, I really grew up really poor. And right now I'm kind of poor, I'm going back to school, trying to get my high school diploma, and things like that. So I'm doing pretty good. I'm having to earn everything by credits. And so I only had 7.5. So that way I'm having to build everything up from scratch because I was really bad when it come to going to school. I didn't go. When I went, there was an issue. I didn't never, really want to do anything, and like I said, I would leave school. I would leave the foster homes. I would leave the group homes. I just wouldn't stay in one spot. And so and then, like I said, the one group home that I was in, and then like I said, ran away from there. And then when I was in like a timeout room, this is kind of like what made me think it's kind of similar, because I would actually, you couldn't keep me nowhere. I would always get out of anything you put me in. So regardless of whether it was restraint or whether it was just out of a cell. Just imagine one of the Alcatraz cells without the bed in it and without the dresser in it. So it was they would hold the door like this, and they didn't have magic locks to where they would do that. So I was like, okay, well, let me see if I can get out of here. I was like, it's kind of scary up there. I was a kid, it's kind of scary looking up there, but I wonder if I shimmy up this doorway, can I get out of here? And so I happened to do that, and there wasn't a way to get out. And so I shimmied down the thing and went on down to the ground and then tried to play. They chased me around the property. And so, and so it's like I said, I find it intriguing that, and I really do believe they made it that night.
Yeah. Well, what drew you to the story? How did you find the podcast, and what drew you to it? And
Well, I've started when I was 2016. I was on the road with my dad, and he was a truck driver then. And I said, Dad, let's watch this, Alcatraz thing. And Ken was on there, and his brother David was on there, and I just started liking it, and I just like, I wonder if they really made it. And so, because I mean, the way they portray it, they just drowned, and that's not reality. Because first of all, if someone would have drowned, don't you think a body would have washed up somewhere? So I just believe that they made it, and I believe that at least one of them is still alive.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's kind of how we feel. I mean, we've been kind of diving into this. And then, do you have any questions for Ken and Mike?
Well, I know y'all had mentioned before, Ken, about at least one of them smoking. Did both of them smoke or just one?
Actually, both were smokers. I don't think John was as much of a smoker as Clarence was. Clarence was a very heavy smoker. Most of the pictures that we have of him when he was growing up, especially when he was in prisons, he either had cigarettes in his pocket, he had a cigarette in his hand. He was pretty much a smoker. John, he was kind of like that time frame. Most of the men in the Anglin family did smoke, including my grandfather, but he was more one of those, occasional smokers.
Actually, I just want to throw something in there. We've talked about this picture a number of times. It was the day after the escape, and we've talked about the letters, because the FBI took the photograph of John's cell, and it has that, big stack of letters on his little writing desk area. Well, Ken, you had sent, or no, I'd gotten a high resolution copy from Amanda, who was on the show a number of weeks ago. And I was just kind of zooming in around John's cell to see if there's anything that, any additional details. And one of the things that shows on that writing desk, when you really zoom in, is a pack of cigarettes. It's the box of cigarettes on there. Can't tell what brand it is, but it's clearly a box of cigarettes.
Oh, and a pipe.
So now it doesn't necessarily mean he was smoking the cigarettes, because of course in prisons back then, the currency was cigarettes in the prisons. So he might have had them to, barter with his fellow inmates.
Yeah, but also you're talking that time period though, in the early to mid early 60s, everybody smoked.
Yeah, of course.
Yes. Everybody smoked.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody smoked.
I'm an ex-smoker myself, so
yeah.
I would probably have to say out of all of my my aunts and uncles, maybe out of the whole lot of 14, there was maybe 2 that didn't smoke. So the rest of them were smokers.
Yeah. It was
that's
crazy.
how it was for me. Yeah.
And you couldn't go anywhere without smoke. I mean, I grew up in the early 70s, and like both my parents smoked. When I woke up in the morning, that's what I smelled, with them smoking with their coffee, and then in the cars with the windows up. It's like crazy. Just all the amount of smoke that these people did consume.
Restaurants, stuff like that.
Restaurants everywhere. You could smoke on airplanes.
Yeah.
Up until like 92, I think, wasn't it?
Yes. Yes. It was. I remember smoking on an airplane.
Bizarre.
I think it was Eastern is the plane that I was on. It had a smoking section in the back.
Yep.
I can remember though, as Justin was telling the story about, Justin, how you wound up, getting in trouble. Your story about how you grew up poor and how you grew up in foster homes really kind of mimics, one, the way that Frank Morris went through life in foster homes. And then it's also kind of mirrors John and Clarence's life experience. They grew up also very, very poor, wanting more out of life, getting made. I'm sure the schools that you did go to, you probably were made fun of just like they were. They were either harassed for being poor just a lot of different things. And so, your story is very similar to what theirs was like.
And then I had another question. Basically, do you, let's see, which one I want to ask? Do you feel, I know I've asked you, Ken, before about, making a movie about this. I mean, because the movie that they did was a good movie, but it was very far-fetched from the truth.
Yeah, the family has always held the position that and I'll be honest, and I've said this before, I love the Clint Eastwood movie. I thought it was very well put together. I watch it anytime it comes on. I have friends who religiously watch it every Christmas Eve for some reason. I don't know why Christmas Eve, but they'll be watching it here in a couple of days. The movie itself was good. The accuracy, I've always said maybe 5% of it's accurate. The rest of it is inaccurate. I just wish that Paramount or Clint Eastwood would have reached out to the Anglin family. They would have been more than happy to have provided information about John and Clarence. And I was never really a big fan of how they portrayed John and Clarence in the movie, as though they really kind of like had this second backseat to the whole story. They were, Frank Morris meets him for the first time, so to speak, in the prison. He's already got the plan going. He decides to invite them along, and he pretty much runs the whole, operation, which really and truly it's far from what actually happened. So, I would love to see another remake of the movie. I would love to see the truth told this time.
Exactly.
Because I believe if you take what we have found, Mike and myself, and made it into a story, it would be a fantastic follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've talked about. And, just, full disclosure, we're working on that right now. We're talking to people about possibly getting that made. But, I think that's the story from that movie, from the Clint Eastwood movie, is very it's very narrow cast, and very, and it's focused on the escape. It's focused on Alcatraz. And as you can see, you've read the book, Justin, and, we've been talking about it for months now. There's so much more to this story that people don't understand. And it's not just like these two inmates escaped, and like, that one that happened up in upstate New York a few years ago where they caught the guys. That was kind of pretty one-dimensional. It's like they just they kind of befriended this woman who worked on the inside, who was a civilian worker, and one of them started having a relationship with him, and that she was their link to the outside, and then she bailed on them the last minute. So and then they were caught very quickly. Right. With this, there's so much more to the background of, Clarence and John, and their them being incarcerated ever since they were like teenagers, and their efforts to escape all the time, and they were like controlled wild animals almost away. It's like they weren't like wild, like they wouldn't do anything really bad, but they did things. They were kind of criminals of opportunity. They saw an opportunity, they would do it, and they usually did it because of a basic need, like they wanted money, they needed stuff, and because they didn't have what everybody else had. They weren't like organized criminals and even when they were working for Mickey Cohen, they were just kind of a tool for him to do what he needed to do. So I just think it's interesting because the real story is way more interesting than the fabricated one, and what happened is, as Ken and Mike has, revealed in their book, and what we've talked about in the podcast, it's several movies. I see this as like, I still try to rack my head when I'm trying to, put together kind of thematically how the dramatic structure of what this would be. I mean, you have you have so many different parts of it. You have the beginning where these guys are growing up, and then how they became, thieves, and getting in trouble and stealing cars and stealing whatever they needed to kind of get through life, all the way to the bank robbery, and then the bank robbery itself. I mean, you could do a movie just on the bank robbery and the trial.
Exactly.
I mean, it's fascinating, and how it would happen. And and then the to me, it's like them and Alcatraz and the escape is like, I mean, that's the centerpiece of it, but it's really one component of this gigantic. And now what we're talking about now, trying to find them, and trying to find them, trying to find relatives, trying to find all the stuff. And then we're still working actively on that. So Ken, I talked to Miguel the other day, and he's going to reach out to you again. And but I just think it's a crazy story that needs to be told the right way.
Although I will say this about the movie, at the time, as Ken has mentioned before, the screenwriter didn't have the FBI report. So he had to kind of, he found some facts, obviously, what he could find, and then he just sort of filled in the rest. And then, of course, because it's a movie, it's meant for entertainment. He created new characters. He created, story elements that were not part of the original, the actual narrative of what happened. So he's writing something for entertainment. But I think the benefit is, Clint Eastwood, this was at the peak of his popularity in the late 70s, early 80s. And somebody of his caliber taking on this project, talking about the Alcatraz escape, really gave it a lot of credibility, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you talk to people like, have you seen the Clint Eastwood movie about Alcatraz? Oh, yeah, I've seen that, or I've heard of it.
Oh, yeah.
It really put it on the map in an national conscious kind of way, and it's been going ever since. And of course, the island of Alcatraz has benefited tremendously, because I think it's because of the movie and combined with the actual escape have made it a very popular tourist stop to this day. Over 1 million people every year visit the island.
Yeah.
So it did benefit the story, even though it's not entirely accurate.
Yeah. So Justin, you also said you'd spent some time in jail.
Yes.
As well. So you want to tell us a little bit about that experience and that kind of like how that kind of dovetails into like you relating to these guys a little bit more than normal?
Well, actually, for what I went to prison for was really just like for like domestic violence and stuff like that. But then, and bad checks. But then I turned around and I committed a attempted armed robbery, and basically tried to get my little fix or whatever, and didn't end up getting anything, but caught and put in jail. So, I just have to, like I said, I'm actually trying to get a pardon for that right now, because like I said, I'm trying to go to school. I'm trying to better my life. I haven't gotten no more trouble. I've calmed down quite a bit. So.
Well, that's great. That's great. So what was the thing that, what was your need to fulfill? So because you were robbing, did you have a drug problem at the time that you were trying to fulfill?
Yeah, I was addicted to crack cocaine for 2 years. So.
Okay.
So Justin, I want to ask you a question, something that I've always kind of been curious about, prison. So would you say that, when you finally got to prison, was escape pretty much something that every prisoner kind of talked about at some point in time?
I actually thought about it and actually tried to plan it. So just never done it.
I always found it fascinating that I believe that John and Clarence were exactly the same way. They plotted wherever they went on how to get out of wherever they were at.
And plus, like I had another question for you that kind of ties into that as far as the prison goes. Do you think that they had any help from the inside? Because like now, if something needs to get done, it's done by guards. Like say if you want to go in a cell and beat up an inmate because that inmate said something to you, and sometimes you get a guard that'll hit that button for you.
Right.
And you'll get to go in there and handle your business and fight about it. And like they have different rules than we have out here.
I would probably say early on when they were in Florida state prisons, that was back when you used to have road gangs They would take the prisoners out and they would cut grass or do other manual chore things outside of the prison. One of my uncles, Uncle Alfred, actually escaped from one of the prisons that way. One of his escapes was he just basically walked off. One of the guards wasn't looking, and he walked off and never came back. But once you get into, and I think I might be correct on this, but once you get into a federal penitentiary, you pretty much have to have some type of help, both on the inside and the outside, to make a successful escape. I mean, you look at the case in Leavenworth with John and Clarence when they were, going to escape. You had to have someone to help. It wasn't a sole, solitary escape. So Clarence was helping John, and so that's how they did. Once they got to Alcatraz, they had to have someone who would help them, like learning the tides. We find out Mickey Cohen was helping. You find out that Whitey Bulger was giving them information and helping. So they had people on the inside that was helping. I don't believe it was any guards. I've heard people say, we suspect this guard or that guard aided them. I don't believe any guard helped. I believe it was all prisoners and then people on the outside that aided it in their escape and then getting away.
Yeah. Well, by proxy, they were helped by the highest court in the land.
Yes, they were.
Plus, we would use what you call kites. If we wanted to get a message to another prisoner, we would turn around and just send kites, and we would send it across the floor, tie it to a string, and send it into the other cell.
Yeah. Explain to the audience, but not everybody knows what kites are. So the audience.
They're like little notes that you attach to a fishing string, which is basically strings out of the mattress or whatever you can find. And they throw them under the door, and you have to retrieve them and pull it into your cell. And once you do that, you can read what they said, and then you just toss it and tear it up and throw it down the toilet.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of how we learned later on that John and Clarence and Frank Morris and Wes would communicate with each other, is by having strings in between their cells, and they would communicate either by notes or, whatever they were doing to alert the other person that someone was coming, or, So that was being used even back in the 1960s.
Yeah, that's in the FBI report. Talks about the string
and the kites.
I know this sounds kind of weird, but we would actually clear out the commode with water. We'd take a cup and we'd clear it out, and we'd talk through it like a telephone.
That's actually been talked about in Alcatraz also. They would purposely clear all of the water out of the toilets, and I believe that's one way they used to communicate also. It's strange how it just still continues to this day.
I know. I mean, still tricks of the trade. So Justin, when you were incarcerated, I mean, how often did you sit lying on the bed thinking about how can I get out of here?
Almost every night, because it was like I don't like being that close in Kissimmee, and that it's. I mean, when you get in there, and if you turn around and you miss breakfast, you don't need to holler out of the cell, "Hey, you didn't give me no breakfast," because you're not going to get it. Even if you act up and throw a tantrum, you're not going to get it. They're just going to say, "Okay, you missed it. Oh well." So you're not going to get home cooked meals like you would get at home. You can't go to the refrigerator when you want to. So it's like, I just was like, I need to get out of here, and I have actually escaped from juvenile facilities successfully. I actually took the links every time, like one out of the fence. I only did like 3 because you would notice a big gap in the fence. So I would take like the things each day, I'd take pieces of it out, and then I took and pulled it back and ran down the road. I got caught a day later, but I did get out.
Yeah. Well, you didn't have a Supreme Court justice helping you and a bunch of gangsters. So, I mean, as we know from the story, that was the key to their successful escape, is that they had help on the outside, on the inside. and they had a plan. So it sounds like you were just you just wanted to bust out.
Right. I just didn't like it. And like, as far as another thing I want to touch on too is like Alan West. I see why he didn't go. I mean, he was terrified to go, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't want to be here. I'm not gonna. They're gonna kill me. They're gonna throw me over. And I think if he would have went, they probably would have thrown him overboard. He told too much information.
I truly believe that Frank Morris would have killed him, even if they had successfully gotten away. Could you have trust, West from? I mean, you would have had to make sure that you took him with you, because if he had just went his own direction, he would have eventually gotten caught. And he would have talked.
He would have sang like a bird.
He would have said something. So either you would have had to take him with you and kept him quiet for whatever reason. And him being the racist that he was, I can't imagine him going down into a foreign country and getting along with those people any better than he did with African American people in the U.S. So I can see him. Frank Morris doing him in. And we know from Whitey Bulger that he did have a knife and he was going to do him in. And even Alan West, in one of his interviews with the FBI, even admits that he never said who it was, but he said that one of them had a butcher knife that they had stolen from the kitchen. So he was aware of it. I've always believed that John made him aware of it, because him and John were very good friends. And I think if John had found out that Frank Morris was going to do him in, he probably warned Wes and said, you really don't want to go with us. And I believe that, along with other pieces, is the reason why he backed out.
Yeah. Justin, how many guys like Alan West did you know on the inside?
Yeah, I know a lot of them, and they didn't last very long, because they got into fights quite often, and they had to be kept in solitary confinement for their safety.
Yeah.
That was another piece, is that I asked Whitey Bulger one time in a letter that, after reading all of the description that Alan West gave of the escape and where they supposedly went to Angel Island. Their plan was go to Angel Island, go over to the mainland, steal a car, break into a store, steal some clothes and everything. I asked Whitey, I said, well, as many prisoners on Alcatraz had an investment in this escape and wanted to see it successful, what would they have done to Wes if they had found out that he sang like a canary to the FBI and gave up these men? And Whitey said they would have killed him the next day on the yard. And he said that Alan West told the FBI exactly what we told him to tell. So you can read into that whatever you want, exactly. But he had a message. He had a story that he was supposed to tell, and he told that story. And that's the reason why no one killed him when he went out into the yard.
Exactly.
Cool. You got another question, Justin? Any more questions?
Well, let's see here. What else I got on here? Okay, if you do think one of them is alive, or maybe, well, which one do you think is alive?
I've always believed
one's 93, one's 94, right?
No, actually, John would be 96 right now, and Clarence would be 95.
Oh, okay.
No, because John was born in 30, and Clarence was born in 31, so it'd be 93, 94.
Is that right? I was thinking it was 96.
Don't ask me to do math.
Whatever.
No.
It's very old.
It's 93, 94.
Mike. He's better at math than I am.
93, 94. But still, that's not young. Not young.
No, that's not young.
But your family, Ken, lives very,
Exactly.
The oldest person that's ever lived is my grandfather, and he was 92 when he died.
Yeah.
And I've always said, for some reason, I've always felt like that John, if any of them are still alive, it would be John. And after going to Brazil with Mike and us meeting up with this guy who carried our equipment. Well, I've told this story, carried our equipment up that mountain for us to do that shoot that we did. And he was 95 years old. He did not look 95. And I quickly realized these people down in Brazil live differently than we do. They don't eat the same type, processed foods that we eat. Their meals are mainly beans and rice and meat. And if John was on that lifestyle and he gave up smoking, which he might have, I could still see him being alive today.
Yeah. Well, was his dad a smoker, your grandfather?
My grandfather he drank at least 6-pack of beer every day. He smoked the Prince Albert cigarette that he used to roll because he used to let me roll them for him. And then he would smoke a pipe because I used to put the Prince Albert in the pipe and light it when I was there. But yeah, I mean, he was a heavy smoker. He drank beer. But he was a hard worker.
Yes.
He worked all his life.
Very physical.
He did not eat processed foods. I mean, he grew up in a time where
That's the thing.
They ate everything that they grew. Anything they ate, they grew it. So it was a different lifestyle.
Yeah. No, like I said, Cindy's lived in Europe.
Yeah.
And I heard she has an Italian aunt she's in her 90s.
Yeah, she's in her 90s, but she has no health issues. She eats. I mean, we eat so clean in Europe. I mean, there's no processed food.
And she also lives at a high altitude.
And she does a lot of gardening and farm work and things like this. But yeah, I mean, that's how you stay healthy. You could drink and smoke all you want, but you're not eating chemicals every day, right?
Yeah. Right, exactly. That's
and also
I always said, if we find one alive, it will probably be John.
Yeah.
Plus, down in that climate in Brazil is very similar to Europe, where they eat pretty clean food, and they're at a higher altitude, which is also in Italy, which keeps you healthier longer. And, he could easily still be alive.
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah. Especially if your grandfather
his father was that old. Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy for that time period.
Yes.
I mean, he's beyond the bell curve. I mean, I don't know what the male, life expectancy back, when did he die?
He died in 89.
89. So 89. Definitely, he probably lived 20 years beyond what the life expectancy for a male was that time. So crazy. So Justin, what's some other things that you like about the story that you identify it? I mean, you talked about the fact that, you came from a poor background and that very similar to the Anglin brothers, and that, you had problems in and out of, school and your foster homes, and you felt like, you're constantly being incarcerated, whether it was in a foster home or whether it was a juvenile center. Does that help you at all, knowing that, hearing this story and knowing that you can identify with these two guys, and also Frank Morris for that matter?
Yeah, I think it's actually good that, maybe I kind of like the Frank Morris part of the story, maybe, because like I said, I've been in basically all the places that y'all named, juvenile hall. Even the school that I went to was a management school. It wasn't a public school. So
yeah,
I kind of fit in that part. And then, like I said, the running away, the escaping from places and doing this, that, and the third. And it's, when you're doing it, you have this adrenaline feeling, that, am I going to get caught? I hope I don't get caught, but then you got to keep going because you're going to get caught. So, and then, like I said, I just believe, like you said, Alan West, he the reason he just didn't stop, he stopped digging. He was scared. He's scared for his life. And I think it was good he backed out, because he would have got done in, because that's just the rules of the prison. And I grew up around gangs and everything else in Charlotte, and hung with one of the biggest gangs there is, which is Crips. And so I kind of know their lifestyle. And if you get to ratting, that's what they're going to do to you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. What was the longest, when you escaped wherever it was that you escaped, what was the longest you were out before you got caught? And how did you get caught?
Well, the one day, the very next day that I got caught was the juvenile facility that I was in, and I got that's as long as I've got out. But as far as the running away, that was a different story. But it's actually escape from somewhere or like that. I've only lasted the one day because they were pretty quick, about what they were doing. And Charlotte PD is pretty good about what they do.
Mm-hmm. Where'd they find you? How far were you from the actual juvie center?
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
They found me on the west side of Charlotte, and the center is probably like on the east side of Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
And I would walk. They had a bus system. I never used it until like I got older. I would always walk from one side to the other. And people were like, why would you do that? Well, I didn't want to go to school. So the only option was just leave.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then like I tried to get out of that situation and make myself, be better and mainstream, go to a regular public school. But I was sitting there and the teachers walked out of the room. I playing on an Apple computer and the guy walks up and hits me in the back of the head. And so I'm like, I'm the kind of person, I'm not going to look like you're going to hurt me. And so everybody's going to think they can hurt me. So I picked up my chair I was sitting in and beat him over the head with it. And so they come in and said, he's already on level 1. You're going back to level 1 now because you followed his behavior.
Yeah. But what would have happened if you didn't hit him? What you would have been taking advantage even more, correct?
Because they would have beat me down for that because they would have said, okay, he's a little chump. He didn't even defend himself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've spent, I've done a lot of prison documentaries and I've heard some horrible stories of people going in on simple drug charges and then they're in there for a few years and then they have to defend themselves and then their sentence is extended. Like they normally would be in there for like 3 or 4 years and then extended for another 10 because of what happened on the inside. And he said it was unavoidable. So it's like I would have been killed if I didn't defend myself. So yeah, unfortunately it's a hazard of being inside those walls.
But the positive note about that is since I'm going to school again, and trying to better my life, get a high school diploma, my dreams is owning a restaurant. And so I love to cook. So.
Well, and the brothers did the same thing, life of crime. Eventually they escape, make it down to Brazil. And what do? They go back to farming. They become model citizens. They don't get into trouble. No one hears from them again. So they keep low on the radar. And they become legitimate at the end of their lives, for many, many years, married, had children, probably grandchildren now. So again, it's sort of paralleling the same story for yourself. It's the, small crimes over the years. And now it's like, I want to go legit. I want to be a model citizen now and have a good life and not have to keep looking over my shoulder anymore.
Yeah, that's how I want now. And, like I said, maybe if there's one alive or even if it's not, it's just the grandchildren, like you're saying, that's going to make Ken's mother very happy. And so she will. I hope that happens. I pray that happens because I want
you and me both.
I want her to get closure.
I agree. And her sister.
Yep.
And my Aunt Merle, she would love to meet her brothers one more time.
Ken, when you were talking to her, I can't remember if you asked her this, your mom, but does she have like any kind of gut feeling that one of them's still alive, or is it just kind of like she doesn't know at all?
No,
because like sibling.
She has the same gut feeling that I have that John is still alive. For some reason, I asked her that question, and she didn't feel like that Clarence was because of his heavy smoking that he used to do. But for some reason, she feels the same way as I do. And I didn't prompt her to say this. She said, I feel like John might still be alive. And I've always felt the same way for some reason.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't say why, but other than I just have this feeling that he is he's probably very much still alive. So,
And he's watching all this.
I will say this: when Fred Breezy was meeting with the family, he did say that that they had watched the Escape from Alcatraz movie with Clint Eastwood, and I believe they had actually read the first book that had been already written by the first author that they had that the family had worked with. The book was down there, and they had actually read it. So, yeah, I would not be surprised if maybe they're keeping tabs on us and or watching this very podcast.
That's crazy.
Do you think that if they were to get caught, they would, be locked up? In my opinion, I don't think they would, because the DOC, they don't have nursing homes. It's a prison. So,
Well, I will say this, I used to not think so either until maybe about 10 years ago. I don't know if anyone remembers this, but there was a man that got caught. He had been on the run for 50 years in Florida for robbing a bank, and they caught him, and he went right back to prison. So, would they throw them into prison? I don't know. I mean, can you imagine them doing that? I mean, whoever catches them, maybe they want to make a statement. I have no clue, but I do know they will never bring them out of Brazil.
Well, if you look at Whitey Bulger, that's exactly what they did.
They did that to Whitey Bulger.
And he was when he died, he was 89 years old, and he was writing letters in his late 80s to you in prison.
Yeah.
Right. Of course, he was a notorious murderer, gangster guy. He was a very high-profile inmate. I think the public would have been outraged if they said, "Well, you're an old man now. You're no harm to society. We'll let you go, even though you killed all these people. We'll let it go." No one would have stood for that. But still, they put him back in. Didn't even think twice about it.
Yeah. I think Whitey's a little bit different story, though. I mean, from what I know and from people that I know inside the FBI, we have a friend who was on the task force, who was the FBI task force who finally caught him. And I think he always knew he was in Santa Monica. I think they knew he was out. I think they knew exactly where he was. The marshals that we've spoken to said that, they just weren't looking for him, because when the marshals got involved, they found him.
Yeah.
So I think it was but yeah, I mean, Art, when he was on there, we asked him that same question. He felt like, they probably wouldn't do anything, but
yeah, like I can believe now. Right.
it's just like the pouch. It's like the pouch I was talking to you about the other day. I mean, that they said that it was on the, basically the nightstand of the cell the next morning. But all of a sudden, before that, it was in the water. And then now they don't know where it's at. That kind of makes me think that they just planted that there to make people think that they drowned and they knew more than what they said they knew.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
yeah,
Because that was their talking point early on, to tell people that they didn't believe that they made it and they drowned, was because that pouch was very important, according to James Bennett. The pouch was very important to them. It had critical pieces of information in it, and they would not have just cast it aside if something dramatic did not happen.
And it magically appeared.
And yeah. So, I guess they didn't realize someone had taken photographs of the cell the morning after the escape, and all those items are in John's cell.
yeah.
Maybe that's egg on their face, and they, no one actually really put two and two together, I guess.
Well, I mean, that's a common thing, it's, all these government kind of misdirection and kind of, lack of a better term, kind of psyops that they do just to kind of confuse people even more. So it dilutes the information. I mean, we've seen it with everything involved with a lot of the government things that they try to keep secrets, whether it's the UFO stuff or whether it's misinformation on anybody that they have. I mean, I just got finished editing a documentary on the crazy stuff that happened with Roswell and how it was a gigantic psyop, and they got this scientist who lived near Nellis Air Force, near one of the bases, who saw all the lights that were flying up, and he documented it. And instead of telling him what was going on, they told him that it's probably UFOs, and they kept on, and then they actually gave him a computer and started feeding him information and gave him like this technical thing where he created like this waveform thing where he can monitor the energy and stuff like that. And they gave him all the, they go, we want you to, you're going to be the top person on this. You're going to observe all this stuff. Just observe and report to us. And so he was doing this for like 10 years, and they drove this poor man insane. He ended up dying in an insane asylum because he kept on coming out saying this is what's happening, and they kept on basically deluding him and just using him as a tool to get the information out, so to take away from the intention of what they were really working on.
Like the drones.
Exactly.
Exactly.
The drones that are flying over my sister's house.
Exactly.
And she's freaking out.
It's like, you don't. So you really, when you get a group of people like that and they're trying to keep a message from getting out, they'll create other messages to kind of, and I felt like that's kind of like what we were dealing with when we had Art on. He was just kind of, still sticking by his story, but still agreeing with a lot of the stuff that you said.
Right.
But he had to stick with the story that, that the mainstream government was kind of propagating. So.
And that was something about with Art that just really kind of shocked me. The very first time I ever met him was in 2014, and he seemed very genuine, wanting to work on the story. We were making the show. I show him the photograph for the very first time of John and Clarence. He freaks out. He's like, "Oh my gosh, this is the best lead we've had in 50 something years." And then just all of a sudden he flips, like, oh, now he doesn't believe it. He believes they drowned. He went back to the original story that was being promoted by the FBI and then eventually by the United States Marshals, that they didn't make it. And if you question him on any evidence whatsoever, I've asked him, all right, what evidence do you have to support your theory that they drowned? There is none. And he would come back and say, well, they didn't reoffend, and that's the reason why he believes they drowned. And I was like, so no evidence is evidence to you, right? Because there's no evidence that they committed another crime. That must mean that they drowned. And I was like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. What if they were not in the country? That would also explain it, right?
How would they even keep? How would they even
make any sense?
No.
How would they even be? Who's to say they didn't reoffend in South America? There would be no record of it.
Exactly. And then when I would ask him about, we had him on, and I asked him about the interview with Alfred. Why is that they interviewed every single inmate, every single family member, every single public person that said they saw something, but yet they never interviewed their brother, Alfred, in prison? And he goes, oh, yeah, they did. And I was like, well, where is it at? Because I haven't seen it. And he claims, oh, yeah, I've read it. Well, can you share it with us? No, can't do that.
Well, according to
what does Alfred have to do with the escape from Alcatraz?
Yeah. Well, according to what you asked your mom, you said Alfred wouldn't have told him anything anyway.
No.
So maybe it's a big nothing burger to begin with.
Speaking of him, do you think that he was killed because he wouldn't give up information?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. Now this is something that you probably could relate to. So, and I've told this story before. So Alfred is in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. He gets there in 1958. He leaves in October of 1963. So he's only there for maybe like 5 years of a 15-year sentence. For whatever reason, they send him to the Kilby State Prison in Alabama. According to what we were told, when he got sentenced for his state crime, it was not to be served concurrently. So he had to finish his federal, and then he starts a state. So, but for some reason, they sent him to Kilby. Couldn't be to start state for whatever reason. But when he shows up, he's automatically given a trustee status. Have you ever heard of anybody in your prison term ever showing up to prison and day one you're a trustee?
No.
That doesn't happen.
Not unless you got a short sentence and you're in jail. Then
Yeah. So he gets to Kilby Prison in 1963, October. My Uncle Man, who visited him in Atlanta, the one who told him about Mickey Cohen helping, comes to see him in November of 1963, the very beginning. He tells my uncle, his brother, that he had made contact, or the brothers had contacted him, and that he was going to go join them. He knows where they're at as soon as he made parole hearing in January. And then later in November, JFK is killed. My mom and dad and me and my sister come to visit him Christmas of 1963. He tells my mom and dad the exact same story. And then within a week and a half, he is killed in prison. They said trying to escape. Now, if you were in prison and you knew you had a parole hearing in 2 weeks, would you try to escape?
No.
Did that make any sense whatsoever?
And plus you get extra time if you're caught. So,
Yeah. I could understand if you went to your parole hearing and they said, well, no, we're not going to give it to you. You got another, 5-6 years. I can understand then, okay, well, I'm going to escape. But why would you try to escape if you don't even know what the results of the parole hearing is going to be?
It just seems totally out of character, too, because he didn't want to escape. He wanted to get out the right way.
His whole time, the 5 years that he was in Atlanta, he not once ever tried to escape. He goes to Kilby Prison, and you're telling me he's this close to a parole hearing, and he's all of a sudden go, okay, I got to get out of here.
Doesn't make sense.
Do you think that when they made him a trustee as soon as he got there, do you think that was a way of because they knew he tried to escape before he walked off? Maybe they were trying to bait him to get him more time.
I wondered if they really thought that he might have known where his brothers were at, maybe putting him in not such a secure federal prison like Atlanta. Now he's in a state prison. Even though they have the electric chair there, they electrocute people there. It's a pretty maximum secure prison. Alfred wrote home right after he got there. I have the letter where he said, I feel so free here. I'm able to walk around. He wasn't locked in his cell like he was in Atlanta. That's how we knew he had the trustee status. His brother comes to see him. They're able to actually physically have physical contact with each other, not looking through some mirror, or not a mirror, but a glass. They go to the bathroom together. So you could definitely tell he had trustee status. And like I said, on the night that they said he tried to escape, January the 11th, this is, it's raining outside, according to the document. We know how dark it gets at 6 o'clock at night at that time frame. He's out of his cell at 8 o'clock at night, and there's no sirens going off from people missing out of your cells. How is that even possible?
Mm-hmm.
Well, him and another guy hiding in a closet, and the sirens are not blaring because at 7:30, some guard walks by and say, "Where's Alfred and this other guy? They're not in their cells." Oh my gosh, they must be escaped. Why are the sirens not going off at 7:30? Why is it not going off at 8 o'clock? Why is it that it's 8:30 before they find him, and the only way they find him is this alarm trips when he hits the tripwire, and there's nobody looking for them?
Yeah, doesn't make sense. What were you gonna say, Mike?
I was going to say, well, Alfred had trusteeship, so, he might have had the ability to, have roaming privileges, but this other inmate was, for all we know, he was a regular inmate. He didn't have those same privileges, and he was hiding with Alfred the whole time. So why was he not caught or spotted, or not in his cell when he should have been when they were doing checks?
Do you guys have name of that other inmate?
We tried for the longest. My mom tried to, right after Alfred's death, tried to get in touch with, my mom wrote to prison and said, "Hey, I want to, can I talk to the guy?" They refused to have any, they wouldn't give him the name of him. And they shipped him out of the prison as soon as it happened. So my mom and them was never able to find out. Do you believe that a few years ago, I say a few years ago, gosh, you think like it's a few years ago, might have been 2014, 2013. Michael Dykes, who was working the case, reached out to me and told me the individual's name and actually gave me his phone number to call him. He said, if you want to reach out to him, here's his phone number. And I tried to call. I never got anyone to answer, but that was a long time ago. But I can look the email up. I kept all my emails with Marshall Dyke. I can look up the name and tell you.
Yeah, definitely look that up. I mean, who knows if he's still alive, but
could be.
You never know. So Justin, so just talking a little bit about what Ken was saying, I mean, since, you have, knowledge of what it's like on the inside being incarcerated, how often did you kind of witness how the prison can really kind of manipulate what goes on inside those walls and, that people don't really understand?
It's just like, okay, if you turn around and you piss the guard off and you're just cussing them out, trying to get recognition or clowning status, basically from the other inmates. If that inmate is getting supplied cigarettes or whatever the case may be, and he was like, well, Justin's over there, he's doing this, that, and the third, man. I'll sneak you this in here tomorrow. Let's go ahead and I'm gonna let you in the cell. Go ahead and take care of him. I mean, that's just the way that works. I mean, because the guards turn their backs more ways than one, and especially like if you're a pedophile, something like that, they tend to just let them beat you.
I mean, Laura, our forensic criminologist who goes on San Quentin's death row for the past 10 years, the guards turned their backs on lots of things. She told us lots of stories. I mean, she almost got hurt because of that. So, I mean, we've heard these things before.
Yeah. And then there was a Corcoran State Prison, and it was like in the late 90s. They had the guards would basically they would put known rivals into the security housing yard together, which is basically the size of like a handball court. No room. All they can see is the sky. They can't see any horizon line. And they would actively put them in there, and they would bet on who would win the fight, and they did this for years. And then they would break it up by, shooting them with rubber bullets and sometimes even shooting them. So it's like there's a culture that goes on in there that I don't know whether or not it's, and I've been in a lot of prisons doing prison documentaries. It's like once you're inside the wall, the correctional officer says, listen, we just keep them in here. We don't really control what goes on, in the yard or in their cells. They said, and then the only way they can control certain things is by manipulating stuff like Justin was talking about, if they have an issue with a particular inmate, or if they're not complying with what they want them to do.
Well, and Whitey talked about in his letters about how Frank Morris was not escaping from Alcatraz. He was escaping from going back to Louisiana, because they had threatened him the same way as they had threatened John and Clarence, that when you come back here, you're not getting out. You're not coming out alive. And he wrote in his letters about, I think he called them dog boys, that, that they would hunt down escaped inmates, with the guns. It was not recapture. It was hunt them down. And
yeah, was that Angola they were going to go back to?
Yeah, Angola.
And
yeah.
Angola, and Louisiana is like one of the only states that has real-time sentencing. They still have it. So if you get 75 years, you're doing every day of those 75 years. So, and they still do it that way.
Yeah. So yeah, it was pretty brutal. At least I don't know if it's as bad now. Maybe it's more relegated to fighting. But back then, Whitey was talking about that the guards would kill prisoners, and that's what Frank Morris was afraid of going back.
Yeah.
And Whitey even shared about people that he knew that had been in Kilby prison before, and how that they would use the electric chair to tease prisoners, or not tease them, but punish them. Like as Mike had said before, they'd strap them into it. They'd either act like they were going to turn it on, or they would slowly kind of hit it a couple of times and scare the Jesus out of whoever was sitting in the chair. Yeah, I mean, you didn't know what they were fixing to happen. And so, even Whitey shared about these stories.
Yeah. Well, Justin, I'm sure you're glad you're not in prison anymore, and we're glad you're not in prison anymore, because you seem like you got your, you're on your way of getting your life together, and and it's good that you've reached out and to Mike, and then we appreciate your perspective. When it was funny, because when I had that phone call with you, the first thing I go, I think he's going to bring a pretty interesting perspective, because he's spent time on the inside. So it's like, you're not only a fan, but you know what it's like to be locked up. You know what it's like to escape someplace. I mean, so it's like, but we're glad that you're on the right way, and we wish you all the best. And we really appreciate you coming on the podcast. And please stay in touch, and hit us up with any more questions. Because we're going to be we're going to still dive into this thing, and we're going for broke here, literally trying to make this thing happen and try to find these guys.
And I definitely will. And I was thinking about what you were saying a minute ago. It brought me to this one story when I was in there. I came in to use the bathroom from the yard, and there was a prisoner in the bathroom, and they caught 2 ounces of marijuana. And he was like, well, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to do this to you. You're going to get in big trouble. You're getting a street charge. We're sending you back, and you're going to come right back and go through it all again. And this is a big dude he was talking to. And he's already been sent back from the federal prison over to the state prison, because he's done got hurt over there. So then he did that over there. This guy picks him up and body slammed him, the guard. So I'm like, I'm out of this. I'm going back outside till you call me in. I'm not involved in this.
I'm sure there was plenty of situations where you had to turn your head away and walk away because you don't want to get involved. Well, anyway, thank you so much for being on. Stay in touch, and then we'll keep on listening.
And thank y'all for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks
for
you.
coming.